Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Horror Realm. I'm Travis Bruce, and today we're going to be doing another author horror spotlight. Today, I have with us a author, and he's putting out his debut novel. It'll be out August 29th, and it's called The Howling Between Worlds. I have with us Eric Ortero. Eric, welcome to the Horror Realm.
Well, hey,
Man, it's great having
good
you
to be
on, man.
here.
It's great. You too, man. It's great having you on. So, tell us a little bit about The Howling Between Worlds.
It's kind of a combination of everything that I love, and I wrote it because I couldn't find that anywhere because it's horror, cosmic horror, but also science fiction and mecha. So
Nice.
I've always had a fascination with like big robots and all that ever since Gundam Wing came on Toonami when I was 6 years old, and really just really got back into reading again a lot when I was maybe like 5 6 years ago, and I was looking for something. I was like, oh, hey, does this exist out there besides like just the obvious anime and all that in Japan? And I couldn't find anything. Like there's nothing out there. So I was like, well, maybe I was thinking about writing it. And I've done a little bit of writing here and there. And then I remember reading a couple of indie authors on Amazon. A couple of them were really good, and then there's a few that just weren't great. Like the idea was there, but the execution wasn't. And I just remember thinking, like, well, maybe I could try and see what I could do because I've always liked stories. I've always had ideas, and being dyslexic, it's kind of I've always hesitated and never really thought I could. And I just, COVID happened, and I really was like, you know what? This is everyone's reinventing themselves, and like maybe this is my chance.
That's awesome. And I've been a robot fan, so I'm sure my age. So I was a Voltron guy.
Oh yeah,
And
my brother was a big Voltron guy.
yeah, I grew up on Voltron, love Voltron. And for people who are a lot younger, Voltron was the original Power Rangers, by the way. It was the original Power Ranger.
Oh yeah,
Yes. So it was the concept was kind of almost similar to Power Rangers. But I also grew up on Power Rangers as well. I was a Power Ranger fan.
yeah, I did too.
Yeah, and that's amazing that you're putting the robots with the sci-fi and the horror. I mean, that sounds like a perfect
Yeah,
mix. That I agree. I have not heard anyone else do. So
no,
that's
no,
great.
it's always like an alien. The mecha shows up at the end, and it's just a loading mech. That was always my favorite part of that movie, was because it's just her and the robot battling it out, and it was a very realistic robot. It wasn't like Power Rangers where they all combined and
Yes.
big sword and doing ninja moves and stuff like that. It was a piece of equipment that had a job, and she used it for something.
Mhm.
And the first one I ever saw that really did that was Gundam, which was the big thing that got into me. I have a whole bunch of action figures up there that I built. Um,
I have a whole bunch too. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's fun, but I remember being enamored with Gundam, and it's funny. I have like a whole timeline I've thought about and all that. But the original Mobile Suit Gundam came out in Toonami in the summer of 2001, and I remember watching that, and only like you've always seen the super robot stuff where it's like the big robot come and save the day, and it's very heroic and monster of the week. Where this was more of the story of like there's no really good guys, and it's just a story of survival. And it's a 15-year-old boy who ends up in a war machine, and he's a refugee. And just over time, he kind of learns to survive and get better at piloting and all that. And there's a certain aspect of horror in that too, because the first episode, he basically watches everyone around him die, and he gets into it just out of pure survival, and he just kind of ends up in it, and he's forced to be in it. He's a child soldier, and he's just a, part of circumstance, and it's literally all military based stuff, and it really introduced that like there could be bad guys that were not Doctor Evil doing evil things for the sake of evil. It was just like, people in situations. Like there's a character in it, Ramba Rawl, he's a good guy. He's introduced as a good guy he loves his wife. Well, there's not even a wife, they're not even married, which I guess was a controversial when that came out because it was showed a loving relationship that was between, unmarried people.
Mhm.
And he's only introduced as just being a really good guy, just on the opposite side. And he is kind of like a brief father figure for the main character, and then he ends up having to kill him. And there's a kind of horror to that too that I've always liked. But again, I like to delve more into the horror, and I really started writing this more as just science fiction. And I wanted there to be like monsters and all that, but it kind of turned more psychological as my main character in it. I kind of is a little bit of a self insert with a lot of his insecurities, but I also took from the idea of just someone who is not like has kind of ended up in their situation, and he just really like just the horror of like going into something and not knowing and not feeling like you're good enough, but you're still there. And then the idea of him being in his mech, which I call combines in it, um, just like the first moment he leaves the tunnel system that they're in, that they've been existing in like for hundreds of years underground, and for all they know, the surface is a wasteland. And he is a courier, and just basically goes through the tunnel system and checks on the people that are like standing guard at the different entrances because occasionally people disappear. So he meets these two people, and they're very nice to him and all that. And they're like, "We think that there's actually some survivors. That there's people living out there, and we're gonna do a check. And like we're just gonna look around, see what we can find."
Mhm.
And when he goes out there, he realizes that like it's wintertime, it's snowing like crazy, and he's realized that he's essentially in a coffin. Like he's in a big metal coffin, and if he was outside of it, he would have no chance of surviving just from the weather itself. And then things start showing up like I like I said, I kind of wanted to be on kind of like the Lovecraft spectrum of it. So like their mind melt, bending monsters and all that. But even just before that, like just being out there and realizing that he is fragile, and without this machine around him, he would have no chance.
It's almost naked.
Yeah, almost naked. Yeah, so there's a kind of like a dependence and a bond that he has, with the combine himself. And later on, like I kind of show that through like when he's basically only been in the combine this entire time because he's nomadic by nature, and all the pilots are at this point. And so whenever he's like sleeps in a bed, like he sits up because he's always used to sleeping in a pilot seat, and he doesn't have that like, and he feels like he needs to be ready at any time.
Mhm. And I played a lot of
Yeah,
so I used to really be into video games, and there was a lot of video games, and I can't even think about that. I think one was named Xenogears, and there was one recently out a couple PlayStation ago that was called Titan. What was it called? Titan something.
oh, attack,
Oh,
not attack on Titanfall.
Titanfall, yes. And
Yeah,
I definitely enjoy those games because it gave you the option to, fight in the mecha or jump out and do
yeah,
whatever. But so all right, so this is your debut. This is your debut novel. So
yeah.
was it tough to sit down and come up with a story that flow naturally and evenly through?
Yes and no, because the first time I tried to write anything was probably 8 or 9 years ago, and I was like, oh, so if to write a story, I need a plot, I need a timeline, I need to like plan it all out and figure out exactly what I want to do, and I did that, and that's as far as I got because I didn't feel like writing it after doing all that. And I realized that after reading about different people's writing styles and all that, and everyone's advice is that everyone does it differently. So I was like, I shouldn't try and do it somebody else's way. So I decided, I was like, okay, when I try to plan too much, I didn't do it. So I'm just gonna write, and I'm just gonna write and write and write, just show up every day and try and write, and then I'll edit. And that's the only way I did it. And what I did is I refused to go back because I remember the first time I tried to write, I kept going back to like the first two chapters and just changing things, editing it. So I just made a file that was separate to what I was writing, and just put all the stuff that I was thinking of afterwards. I was like, oh, insert this into the first chapter, allude to this later on. Oh, maybe add this in there. Maybe, oh, this is the name of this thing now that I just came up with 2 months in the writing. And when I did that, it was really kind of liberating, just kind of, I believe it's called pantsing in the writing community rather than plotting. And I guess a little bit of both because I had the plotting on the side. And I would find that I was just thinking about it all day at work because I worked in food service at the time. So it's a lot of like moving around, but you're not really doing anything with your mind the entire time. So I just was thinking about it. And then I would take a bathroom break and sit there and jot down all the thoughts I had before I lost them. And then, I would write at night. And I'm a father. My daughter is now 7 or almost 7. So the only time I really had a chance to write was when everyone went to bed. I'm sitting there with my laptop, and all that, and I had the peace to do it. So everything had time to build up all day, and people had like they had writer's block and all that, and I was really like bursting at the seams, ready to write.
And did you already have an ending in mind when you started writing, or is that something that you got to during the process? And if you did,
And
how many times did the ending change?
um, it's actually the beginning of a series. So I like when I first started writing this one, it was going to be the prologue, and like it just kept building and building and building. I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna have a lot more to this because the entire story is modeled like an interview. So, um, I basically how I was thinking about it was like I had scenes that I wanted. I was like, oh, I want this to happen, but I need to get there, and so that I was basically like, I just kind of had a timeline in my mind of things I wanted to happen at certain points, but I just needed to get to them and make them make sense and move them around. There's stuff I took out. There's stuff that's I wanted to be in the first book that's going to be in the later books. But yeah, like I said, it was going to be a prologue, and it just kind of became its own thing. Because how it starts is that we follow Wallace, who lives in the underground city of Gamora, and he works as a liaison for the Magi, which is the AI that basically controls everything. And the job for him is to basically make it as seamless as possible so that everyone there basically it has no inkling that they're being controlled in any way. It's just it's a utopia. And if there's any problems, any at all, they go to him, and then he either deals with it or he runs it up the chain and interacts with the AI to change on a larger scale. So and it can be simple things like there I have him talking to a what is it called, ornithologist, that it's just a hobby that he has because he doesn't need a job necessarily, so people just kind of shift through things that they like and interact with their environment how they want. And he's noticing that because it is an enclosed environment, it's an underground dome, and there is agriculture there, and and he's trying to make sure that the wildlife is good and you know has a homeostasis, but because it is artificial, it'll never naturally happen. So there's like certain animals that will eventually overtake things, and like so they have drones that kind of take care of that. So if there was going to be too many pigeons, the drones take care of that. But this guy noticed that the drones were taking out all the robins too because just the processing wasn't right, and he was like, okay, so this you need to narrow this down a little bit and stuff like that. So that's the kind of the complaints that he handles. But then our main character, Laird, shows up, and he is what I call in there a Ronin. And they are enhanced soldiers that are survivors from the war that caused the cataclysm. And they are essentially immortal because they have what I call an Iker in their system, which is just nanomachines that maintain their body and also have them handle the stress of piloting the mechs. But they're also a force to be reckoned with hand to hand. So he shows up and he's waiting in his office, and everyone's uncomfortable because they realize without knowing that he is something different. He feels like a predator, like a lion among lambs. And they can tell this by he is abnormally still. He doesn't seem to breathe. He always seems to be hyper aware. And I don't know if you've ever been in a room with someone that has like just come back from combat. Like
Yes.
there's an energy about them.
Yes.
And depending on how that person is, you don't know how that energy is going to be. And I've met people that were really keyed up and that anything could set them off, or there's people that they just knew that anything that happened around them, they could handle it. And these people that are used to peace, no conflict at all, have really uncomfortable around someone that is essentially a loaded gun.
Yes.
So he draws a lot of attention, and he clears his rest of his appointments, and it's like, I want to talk to this guy. Because these people don't come into the city very often because, they're uncomfortable. And people don't like them around because it's a reminder that, there is a need for war and all that.
Mhm.
So, and it starts with an interview, and he's like, okay, why are you here? And he's like, well, I think there's a problem. I think that the city is in danger, and there's threats that exceed anything that I think you can handle in here. And so he basically shows him his memories through like a mind meld thing, but through technology, so that he gives him his memory chip, and they experience Wallace will experience Laird's memories episodically, and he's showing him, and so he has the feeling of everything that Laird felt at the time, because a lot of it is mental as well. And that's when he just basically tells a story and events that happen. And it starts off with him encountering with those two guys on their patrol, and they're attacked by monsters, and they're like, these things are usually nomadic. They don't come in groups like this group did, so there's something weird here. They start investigating more, and an entity shows up that starts influencing their minds and starts trying to convince them to come further into the woods, to leave their combine, to leave their safety. And Laird comes out of it due to a an AI that's in his combine that is actually the stored memory of another soldier. So that's kind of like his interface with it as well. Someone that is in there that is also handling things, letting them know like, hey, your ammunition's low, hey, all that, like kind of manages it around him. And not all of them have that, and he just happens to. And because of that, he survives. Like he starts realizing that, like he starts feeling that this entity is calling to him, that it is basically telling him everything that he wants, that he is going to be like, if you leave this and join me, you're going to be loved, you're going to feel warmth, you're going to have friendship and camaraderie. And so he starts trying to get out of the cockpit. And the Graham, his AI that is part of, that helps control it and maintain it and all that, it's like, whoa, no, 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 no. This is not okay. He starts, because he is purely mechanical. He doesn't see everything that he is seeing. He just sees that my guy is trying to get out of here. He's not being
Something's
rational.
wrong.
So he shuts everything down. Everything goes black, and he just cuts him off from the combine. And he comes to at that point because it's sensory deprivation. He has no access to this entity. And he's like, okay, like, I'm going to cut off your audio because I think that's what's doing it. And we're going to go out there and try and save these guys because they are, being called into the woods by this creature.
Yeah.
And
It's set
when he
up.
comes to, yeah, when he comes to, one of them's already gone, and he grabs the other one, and that kind of starts the whole thing because he's like, okay, I need to tell other people about this. If there's something out here that is can do that to three super soldiers in their 30-foot war machines, that's something to be worried about.
Something
And
bad.
that starts his whole journey on basically being a bearer of bad news and bringing all these people, like all the nomadic Ronin and super soldiers and all that together to try and see what this is. And through the process, they discover that there is indeed civilization that exists out there, and that it is a cult that worships these things, that feel that is like kind of Christian in base. Like their leaders think that these are angels that are communicating with them, and they're trying to like summon them and all that. And that's also a threat, but also the entities that I call the seraphim or Miklahim, and the different levels of angels are like kind of a threat too, but also the cult that is summoning them is another threat.
She said, "This sounds like an amazing story." By the way, it sounds like something that I would definitely. So how long did it take from concept to actually getting it on paper and getting it into a publisher's hand? How long did that take?
It took me 6 months to do the first draft, and then it took me a few more months to do editing and all that. And then I remember reading those other indie authors and thinking like what worked and what didn't. Like I read some stuff that I thought was great, and I read some stuff that wasn't. And I came down to the point of like I think they didn't have enough editing done. They didn't have other people looking at it. It felt like they published their first or second draft. So I was like, I'm not going to release this until I think it's been worked enough. And me being dyslexic and not really having any formal training in this, I was like, I should like get an editor and do all that, do go through the process. But like I was trying to like okay figure out how to do that. And traditional publishing, which is ideal, I guess,
Mhm.
like they would do all of that, but you also have to have it good enough for them to be like, okay, we'll take this on. So everywhere I was looking, they're like, oh, we want an agent, we want it to be edited and ready to go, and like I can't really do that. So I was thinking like I'm gonna have to self-publish. So I was looking around for editors, and it's a lot of money. But my wife, who is extremely supportive, like she's a complete angel when it comes to this, was like, if you really feel like this is something you want to do, we can figure it out. And I found a developmental editor who was, they were like, okay, this is your first novel. We should do this to figure it out. Worked with them, and when I hired them, it was 6 months out, more or less, that they were going to have time to do it. And worked with them for months. And then they were like, oh, you still need a line edit. I was like, well, crap. Like, I don't know if I can afford that again right away. So I kind of sat on it, did some more writing, was also kind of figuring out what my next step was. And um, it kind of stagnated for a bit, but I got a line editor that was also a publicist.
Nice.
And yeah, so I was like, oh, this is great. It's marketing and exactly what I need. And that was a couple years down the road. That was this last year. And I first started writing at 2020, like at the beginning of COVID. So it's been years in the making. And yeah, so I got in with him, and he it was like he was running a deal at the time, so he was like, yeah, I'll take it in. It's this amount of money, which was cheaper comparatively to a lot of other stuff. And then I don't think he realized how big of a project it is because it's 120 words, 120,000 words, I mean, and like he was like, okay, you need a lot of work. Um, so it ended up taking him a few like months, and I still am waiting to get back on his edit, which is going to be this month sometime. But yeah, and then I started doing Royal Road because do you know what Royal Road is? It's kind of a fan fiction site a lot, but people put writing up there and they do it episodically, and it's kind of a way for people to get their writing seen by other people.
Okay.
So I discovered that and was like, you know what, maybe I'll put this out there, see a proof of concept if anyone else is interested in this. And I did that and was getting some good reviews, and a lot of it in there was fan fiction. So people that reviewed it were like, this actually seems like a novel. Like this is something different, and they were really enjoying it. And I met Dan Schrader through that because he was one of the only other people doing horror on there. And we reviewed all our stuff. We started talking, and he got in contact. I don't even know how like maybe he was submitting stuff around, but he got in with Crystal Bainham of Unveiling
Yes.
Nightmares, and he was telling me about that. And I was looking, I was like, well, maybe I can see if I can submit. And asked him because he showed me it and all that, and I didn't want to step on his stuff. I was like, hey, do you mind if I submit too? And I had some short stories and stuff, and he was like, yeah, I don't care, sure. Like he's a very very sweet guy, very supportive, and really wants to see other authors succeed as well. So I submitted, and that started my journey into getting in with them. And I gave him a few short stories, and I was like, she had mentioned that like, oh, she's starting to do novels too. So I was like, I have a novel. You want to look at it? And she was like, yeah, absolutely. And she read a little bit of it and was like, this is brilliant. I definitely want to sign you on. And that's how I got to where I am now. And honestly, like I had no deadline. Like it was just gonna happen when it happened. So I'm happy that I finally have a deadline. I finally can tell people that have known I've been writing a book forever that like it's coming out this summer, which
Mhm.
is like surreal to be able to do.
That's amazing. I'm actually interviewing
Yeah.
Dan tomorrow. Um,
Oh yeah.
and yeah, and Crystal's amazing. Actually, Dan and I were just on a podcast earlier today,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, and Crystal's absolute amazing. Unveiling Nightmare, I believe, is
Yeah.
the name. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's
Yep.
amazing. I interview a lot of her authors, and she's doing good stuff over there. Amazing stuff over there.
Yeah. She really feels like she's putting like the community and the writers first,
Yes.
and really, yeah, like and I mean, I've only heard stories of other publishers and all that. Like, it just seems like it's a grinder. They're just like getting stuff, putting it out, and then that's it. You know,
Yeah.
where she seems
And
to really want success.
exactly. And I was actually on a podcast with Crystal and a couple authors. Um, and I'm not an author. I am a horror fan, so I love, especially
Yeah,
indie. I love reading, watching horror, indie horror movies, and promoting. And one of the things we talked about it is something I agree with. I read a lot of self-published indie horror, and you can tell it wasn't edited. It's
yeah,
some of it's not bad. I mean, you can still read through it, but some of it's unreadable because the actual
yeah,
flow of the story is completely off. Random characters pop in, and you're like, "Well, who the hell is that? I don't remember talking about that." And or it's like grammatical errors that it makes it completely unreadable.
yeah. And
So
that's
having it
that's
edited is
where I
important.
think I suffer. Yeah, it is, because I think that's where I suffer. Is that like I said, I'm dyslexic, and I have a lot of trouble with that, and I also am not very good with like syntax and all that. Like the way I was reading it, like writing it, was like how I would think it would sound. I'd read it back to myself out loud. I'm like, does that sound right? And kind of do it like that. But I know that's like that's a fault. So that's why I wanted to make sure I did everything I could to fix that.
Yes. Now, does your wife is she your person like so once you finish get something a draft done, is she the person that you let read it first to get her opinion?
Um, we are solar opposites. I am all about like the nerdy stuff, the horror, I got books for date, like all about all kinds of stuff. And she is like the rom com girl who loves like love stories. Like Valentine's Day is her favorite holiday because she loves love, and she is like that kind of person. So and I said, she's so supportive. And like the
Mhm.
only reason I've actually gotten this far was because her behind me, but she has no interest in any of the stuff that I like.
Uh-huh.
But she's like I said, she's supportive. She's not like one of the like I've had other people that are like, ugh, like you like that, and it kind of sucks when someone is shitting on something you like,
It is. It
and
is.
and yeah, and I mean she will jokingly sometimes, but like she's all like she got me like manga for last Valentine's Day actually. We She got me like the hardcover Berserk Volume 1, a Berserk T-shirt, and like Berserk pants. Like she was like, oh, it's red and black, so it kind of fits with the themes.
Mhm.
And she was like no idea what it is, just knows it's something I like, and is completely supportive of it. So yeah, that now, and I mean, it's not a problem. But with like you said, the first person to read the first draft, all that, like she's not that person.
Okay.
So that's
Yeah.
and she's always telling me, she's like, you need a love story in there somewhere. Like you need love. People love love, and she's not
You
wrong
do,
by the
yeah.
fact that yeah, and people like women drive markets. Like
Yes, 1%.
it's a yeah. So, and I don't know, like I do have an idea for a love story in there, but it's gonna be tragic. I don't
So
know how to make it work in there without it being tragic.
so So I have a question. So I have a lot of first time readers who watch my show, or people who are thinking about being first time readers. What are some struggles besides the obvious, which is the financing part? But besides
Yeah.
that, what are some struggles that a new author like yourself is running into?
Bad advice, honestly.
Really?
Because when I really got into the writing stuff, I was like, oh, I'm gonna like, there's like Facebook has groups for this. I was like, I just joined like 15 groups,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of people that have never written anything giving advice like they're an award-winning novelist, and and it like I said, like you don't know who to take advice from. And then you see people like, oh, you can't do this in a novel. You can't do this in a novel. And I can think of examples of really good novels where they do those things.
Hmm.
And like one of the things I see is like multiple POVs. Like you only should have at most five, and you need to have them separated by chapters that label what they are. Joe Abercrombie does not do that, and he does it very well. Like his chapters are done by like location, so like there might be seven characters in a location, and it just kind of switches between them, and it works because it's done well. Another, not, my cats are jumping all over the place in here. Sorry.
You're good.
Um, Another one, R. Scott Baker's Second Apocalypse series. Like, there's probably like 40 POVs through those novels, and again, like, there's no clear difference when they're happening. It's just all of a sudden, like, oh, Inrow is doing this, and you're like, oh, I guess I'm listening. Like Inrow's the POV now, and like they're not spoon feeding, uh, their readers. Which I mean, some people, everyone has different tastes, but
Yes.
I've just really realized that you can do anything. You just have to make it work.
You got to be good at it too. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 and it takes practice.
Hmm.
And yeah, the financing and all that, but also like markets. Like I always saw stuff that was like, oh, you should write what's popular and what people want right now. But paranormal romance was not popular really until Twilight broke the market,
Hmm.
So, and like YA, wizardry, magical stuff wasn't popular until,
Harry
Harry
Potter.
Potter debuted. So I was like, if I like it, someone's going to like it. And so if I'm going to write a book that I want to read, there's got to be other people that are going to write it.
I agree.
So yeah,
This
and so
and this
but
is
that's a problem too. Is that publishers are just looking for a guarantee sell. So
yes.
being different is kind of bad when it comes to that.
I actually did a live interview with a filmmaker who's pretty controversial, disturbing movie and disturbing movie. And like the one thing I was saying was, as a reader, as a watcher, as a fan, a lot of horror creators, authors, filmmakers, they're afraid to go into the unknown. They want to go the safe
Yeah,
route with what has been proven and follow that mold, something that's already out there. They're afraid to try something new out because I think it's because they're afraid of failing. And
yeah,
like you said, is there an audience for this? But like, how do you know unless you do that? Of course, I mean, there's horror fans are always looking for something new and original.
yeah, and like you said with the indie horror stuff, that's always like kind of breaking the mold. One of my favorite horror movies is an hour-long indie movie called Headhunter, where there's two actors in it, and it's all like their budget was really small, and most of the action happens off screen, but it is done so well. It is so atmospheric, and it is so beautifully shot that like it's so effective. And really, the only action I guess you can see is at the end, where it's the climax of the story.
Mhm.
But it works so well. But people are afraid to do stuff like that.
Yeah, people are afraid to go over the boundaries. I don't know, but
Yeah,
like I'm glad that there's so many authors and filmmakers like yourself who are trying something new. Like I'm being dead serious. Like you done sold me on your book. I'm gonna. Whenever it comes out, I'm definitely getting a copy and reading it in that bad boy. So,
Well,
Eric,
good.
real
And
quick, yeah,
yep,
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I was like, go ahead.
yeah. Oh, no problem. Yeah, I'm just happy because it's hard to do an elevator pitch for, honestly, because I'm like, oh, there's mechs, there's utopian world, there's a cult that it's based off of Christian ideology, but they're worshiping like elder gods. Like it's hard to do an elevator pitch, and I always just kind of go like it's kind of like Pacific Rim, but in H.P. Lovecraft's world. Like that's just kind of
I'm
how
gonna
I
show you.
yeah
I'm gonna show you how your elevator pitch is what you told me in the beginning. Mechs, horror, sci-fi. That's all you got to say,
yeah
and I'm telling you, you don't sell it. When somebody asks you what it is,
yeah
imagine mechs, horror, and sci-fi. That's it. Boom. You can
yeah
tell some like post-apocalypse world too. You toss that bad boy in there, man. You're good to go. Good to go.
yeah, that's true. What
And this
what
is
is
coming from
something
somebody
too that
who has a marketing background. You're good to go.
yeah, oh yeah,
You're good to go
awesome.
with that. All right. So Eric, where can everyone find you, my friend?
I have a Facebook. I'm really bad at marketing myself, I guess, because I'm not too good at networking. I'm not a very social person. So I just have a Facebook page for my author page. It's Otero, and
Okay.
that's where I just have everything out of pretty much.
Now, your book, is that going to be through Unveiling Nightmare, or how are people can they pre-order your book right now?
No, they can pre-order it in July though, July
July?
29th, and I'm gonna have a whole launch, I guess, and all that. But it is gonna be published through Unveiling Nightmares, and from what I understand, because it's so far out that I haven't done all the detail work with her yet, but it's gonna be available on Amazon and other places too. So
Awesome, awesome. Well, listen, as soon as the book is out and I get a copy and read it, I would love to have you back on and talk about it.
absolutely,
Thanks for coming on, man. Well, listen,
yeah,
everyone,
no problem.
check out Eric and look out for the Howling Between the Worlds. And it's once again, it's mechs, sci-fi, horror, post-apocalypse. Sold. All right, well, everyone. Well, thank you for coming to the Horror Rim. I'm Travis Bruce. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.
Yeah, good night.
Boom. That was good, man.